Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our third QAP focus group. This format, we have some topics that we'll talk about. We kind of follow the same sort of outline every focus group, just because we know not everyone can attend every time. So we will follow a little bit of an outline, and then there'll be an opportunity to bring up topics at the end. Here in just a moment, Pam will put the agenda up on the screen so that you can take a look at it. We do have one more focus group in June, June 4th. So if you have, if you'd like to attend, June 4th from 2 to 3 Central Time, we'll have availability. Really quickly, I just want to say who's in the room here at NIFA. Nobody joined us in person, except our friends from DED. So it's myself, Sarah Dakota. I'm the Low Income Housing Allocation Tax Credit Manager. We have Pamela Skinner. That was close. I almost used her old last name. She's the Assistant Allocation Manager. We have Cassandra Stark from NIFA as well, who is our Allocation Coordinator. And then from DED, we have Michelle Grimes, who kind of handles, you do home, and are you handling HTF right now too?
So, yeah.
Yep. So we have, that's all that's in the room. So 100% will be of comments will be coming from online. So feel free to unmute yourself. And if you have any questions, just bring them up. That's perfectly fine. Or any comments on our topics. And if it seems like we have a lot of people talking at once, then we'll have you raise your hand. But in the past, that hasn't been a challenge. So we'll just go ahead and allow you to unmute and talk about things. So one of the things that we'd like to talk about is the process and how we've made changes in the last QAP regarding the threshold deficiency review process. So this is more of a practical practitioner level comments, or we're looking for comments if you have any issues or if you'd like to see improvements. We have gone to a threshold deficiency review, which allows, we review the full application, and then it allows developers to make corrections to the threshold items after we've done an initial review. That's switched from the order that we used to have it, but our goal was to get more developments to meet threshold. And so far, we've only had a couple of rounds under this new QAP, but it has been successful. So is there any comments about that new threshold review process for those that have participated in it? Okay.
Ryan.
Oh, Ryan?
I was just gonna say, I agree. I mean, I feel like it has been successful, so I agree that I do like the method and how it's done now. And it just obviously gives more opportunity for more applications to have a chance.
Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate it. Our whole goal is to make sure that we have, we're working towards funding, complete applications, and the more competition we have, it drives everyone to, it's more competitive, right? So thank you. We appreciate your comment. One of the things we've also done over the last couple of QAPs is to really move the application timelines up in the year. So in the past, we had our 9% awarded, towards the middle of the actual credit year. And now we've moved to doing a bit of a forward commit. So for example, this year's 9% round, the applications were due in May 9th. Pam can read my mind, but I'll not remember the date. May 9th, and then we will make an award recommendation at the August board meeting. And that will be for 2025 credits. So it's a bit of a forward commit, but not overly so. But that allows us to, allows developers a little bit more time before they have to complete their carryover. And it just allows a little bit more flexibility, especially if there's multiple funding sources. We also changed the date on our bond side. Now on that side, we're not able to forward commit the bonds. So we do have our due date at the end of the year. So it's in November 28th, exactly. And then we will award tentatively at the February board meeting. And so that would be in the same year. So if it's 2025 volume cap, it'll be awarded in 2025 at the February board meeting. So our goal is to maintain, at least if we get positive feedback, and so far we have, is to maintain that same schedule, that accelerated schedule. So a May due date, and then an award at the August board meeting for 9%, and then November due date and an award at the February for the 4%. Any comments about those timelines? The good, the bad, the ugly? Anything? Okay. One of the comments we also, I don't believe Christina is on the line. Oh, Christina. Do you want to touch on your funding source, the DR funding source, and the availability of that going forward?
Yeah, for the disaster that was related to 2019 floods, DR 4420, we will not be on any future QAPs at this time in relation to that disaster. So unfortunately, we are at our limit of funds and timing. I should say, fortunately, that means the money is getting out there.
And then Christina, it's also that the CDBG DR funds will not be available for this upcoming, which has nothing to do necessarily with this QAP, but for this, the next year's, the 2025 bond round, correct?
Correct. Yep. For that 4%, we will not be able to be on that. Just again, due to the timing and the amount of funds available.
Thank you, Christina. Appreciate it. Is there any other general comments about the process? The QAP, the application submittal process. We got a new software this year. We know that we're continuing to work with some items on that, but there's been some really good benefits where you can have more than one person working in an application at one time and things like that. So we anticipate approval with that software all the time, but any process comments? Okay. Now, some scoring conversation. We've had a couple of conversations and comments made directly to us at NIFA that 2 QAPs ago, we changed the efficient housing production, the value of the points for the efficient housing production. So they're not weighted as much as they once used to be. We cut it in half. So we've had some comments that perhaps we need to look at efficiency a little bit closer again and perhaps increase the weight of those points. Just because, you know, we've heard, well, we all know that housing is so needed, affordable housing is so needed throughout the state. So we've had some comments about increasing the weight of those efficient housing production points. We'd love to hear from those practitioners, you know, any of our partners, anything, to see what your thoughts on that are. They were 12 points and now they're 6 points. And it used to be that those 12 points, the efficiencies completely drove whether or not, or for the most part, drove what would get recommended. Now it's more evened out, but there's definitely not as much of a focus on that anymore. Any comments on that? Or increasing the value of those points?
I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. So, but if we have leverage and collaboration as one category, which can include, obviously, isn't that somewhat kind of help with efficiencies as well, along with the 6 points. I mean, aren't they kind of the same in some aspects?
Well, it would, no, and no, not necessarily. Where it would impact is the credits, the credit per person, that calculation. So, credit per occupant, that calculation. So that would, because in theory, you'd ask for, if you have more partnerships and more collaboration and leverage, you would ask for less credits, right? So that's where you might see it, but the other ones are all based on total development costs, less land and fees and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm probably more in the category of keeping it the same, unless we can prove that it's dramatically hurting the program and the unit, count how many we're creating. But I mean, I could be convinced if it needs to go up a couple points. I don't think it needs to double. I'm not sure that we should carry that much weight in that category. Personally, I think that's a pretty big number, when these applications are scoring around 60 to 65 to take it, 12 would be a, big number.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that feedback. Anyone else have feedback regarding efficiencies? Okay. Natural disaster. As Christina mentioned, DR 4420 is clearly part of our last couple of QAPs, since we have our application is a partnership with the Department of Economic Development. We specifically called out DR 4420 in the natural disaster points. That's definitely going to go back to how it used to be. And for some of you, that means nothing, because it was a long time ago and you probably don't remember. But in the past, our natural disaster points, we tried to be nimble with those so that a disaster could occur and have been declared, and it doesn't have to be listed in the QAP, because obviously that we'd never be able to help or give any advantage to communities that have had a loss of housing if we listed them all in the QAP or the application. So our language will definitely be a little bit more general. And it will be tied to a natural disaster declaration, and then also the loss of housing in a particular area. So, and again, that's the key thing. There'll have to be a presidentially declared disaster, and then there will need to be a demonstrated loss of housing. And we'll clear, we will definitely clear that up. I know that they've just FEMA's made some changes to how they declare. In the past, we just used the individual assistance. If an area was qualified for individual assistance, then automatically that qualified. That's kind of changed a little, so we're going to work on that. But again, the two pieces that we'll focus on: disaster and loss of housing. Any questions or comments about natural disaster, since it feels like it may be a busy season this year?
Hey, this is Chris. Will that be, I'm trying to think how it was in the past, county driven or specific community?
We're still talking about that. In the past, it had to just lie within the areas of the declared natural disaster area. So it wasn't necessarily county or community driven. It was all just if you were within those boundaries. So I don't know that there'll be a difference. We added that county and city as part of DR 4420 because of the need to spread those funds. And I'm sure Christina, if we need further clarification, can talk about that. But that's why there was that delineation between county and community.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Anything else? Okay. Again, another fairly new change was our desire to make sure that we were doing more efficient job of hitting the 50-50 metro versus non-metro split in our 9% round. So in the past, we all scored everything together and then we did our best to balance out the 50-50 split. Now Metro has one scoring criteria, non-metro has a different. There are a lot of similar questions, same questions, but they're a little bit different and they're scored separately. And we now get closer to that 50-50 split based on credits on the with metro and non-metro. So we've seen success in that area, which our board has really been concerned about, is making sure that non-metro areas are getting credits as well. We also added the designated ranked alternates opportunity so that if anybody returns credits or something happens in the let's say Congress passes the Affordable Housing Improvement Act and we get an influx of credits, that way we have a way to move forward on additional projects that are actually shovel ready and prepared to go. So we've been able to use that once so far on a project because another developer had returned credits. So we were successful in that. Now this last round, we haven't had that and we've not moved on to a designated alternate, but it was really nice to have in place and made us able to deploy the resources we have in a much faster way without having to go back and have a second round or put it all into Crane or something like that. So we really like it, but we'd like to hear if there's any comments about the changes in now we're scoring metro versus non-metro completely separately and the designated alternate. Does anyone have any comments about that? We've talked about this at a couple of the other meetings, and I know several of you have been on, repeatedly been on these meetings, so thank you. We appreciate it, but one of the board's priorities has been to prepare individuals for homeownership or put people in a position for homeownership. Obviously, the tax credit program by nature cannot support homeownership. It doesn't do that. You have to, the only way to have a homeownership component is to do our Crown program, which is basically credits to own. So it's a long-term rent with the option to be able to purchase at the end of the first 15 years. So we've discussed this a couple of times about how to improve the Crown program. We have a couple of groups that do Crown, but it's not extremely popular. We've had conversations about the way the points work out right now. It's difficult to make a Crown project work, and we recognize that because of the extended use period, and you're not able to waive the right of waive qualified contract. So we recognize those two things as things we need to look at to make Crown applications more competitive. But as developers or partners, is there anything you see with our Crown program that you would like that would make it so that you might be interested in doing more Crown developments?
I mean, this would kind of go back to the efficiency. I mean, could you score them separate? Because I just don't feel like a single family house is going to be competitive on the efficiency points, especially cost. You know, to build a single family house in Omaha, it's $400,000, you know, pretty easily with a lot. And so, you know, I've looked at Crown deals, but they from a scoring side, they just don't seem to make a lot of sense.
Thank you, Ryan. Anyone else have any comments? Okay. Again, one of the board's priorities over the last couple of QAPs has been to encourage development of family units. Overwhelmingly, especially the last couple of rounds, most of our applications have been for senior developments, and most of our awards have been for senior developments. Now, our applications this year, just in this last 2025 round that we just received, they are a little bit, it's a little bit more evened out between family and senior. But one of the things we're looking at is we do offer senior points right now, but you know, we've heard that senior projects are automatically, you know, a little bit, that they're a popular choice because maybe the community needs it, and that's really, I mean, that's obviously a thing. If the community, you need to build what a community needs, and if they need senior housing, obviously that's driving a lot of these. But then we've also heard that some of the operations are a bit easier on the, in regards to the senior developments because the lower price or cost per unit per annum on your operating. So are we thinking that, we'd really like to know if you think that is there any changes we should make to the senior development requirements? Do we still need that many senior points? Right now we do 2 points. Is 2 points needed? Really, we'd like to hear a little bit of feedback from the group.
Okay, this is Twyla, and I guess from my community's perspective, it would be nice to see points go to family housing because it seems like especially in our rural areas, the biggest unmet need are family units that are 3 bedrooms, sometimes 2 bedrooms, but that 3-bedroom unit is A, not available, and B, badly needed.
Thank you, Twyla. And who are you with?
The Fairbury Housing Authority.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Your name's familiar, but I couldn't place it. So thank you very much. We appreciate that comment. Anyone else have any feedback on senior versus family? Ryan?
Of course. So I've heard at our last commission meeting that a lot of the shelters in Omaha, and I've heard it from Candace Gregory herself at Open Door, that some of the largest populations showing up at the shelters around Omaha, and I think John Turner maybe even said in Lincoln when I spoke to him, are seniors. Seniors that can't afford to pay the real estate taxes or insurance are getting displaced and ending up in shelters. And so I think that we probably should continue to monitor the point thing, you know, in the future. I think we should keep it as is, just because I do feel like in some communities, a senior housing 2-bedroom duplex could open up a house for a family that senior is currently living because they don't have a situation where they can move to, you know, somewhere else. So it potentially has the opportunity to create family housing indirectly by creating housing for seniors. So I do feel like there's some benefit there.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's Chris. I think those are definitely, like Twyla said, those are going to be community driven. The senior points, I believe, were added in order to offset the additional tenants, additional bedrooms for a 3 or 4-bedroom home that then skewed the efficiency points. So those points were added to offset. I don't know. I don't look at those as an incentive to build senior project. I think, you know, they're there mainly to equalize a family in a senior project. I don't want us to see that loss. I mean, like you just said, for this round, and it's the same QAP we had last year, this round it was a little more even. So I don't think we need to change that and allow the developers and the communities to decide what makes sense, because of the applications we turned in, we have both senior and family, and it just depends on where we're at. And then it's up to us to do our best to, figure out how to make those projects score and equal out. So I think they're great, right? I think we're good right where we're at.
Chris?
Yeah, Chris made a good point. I didn't mention, so that he's 100% right on the efficiency side.
Sarah, this is Darren.
Hey, Darren.
Yeah, I would sort of agree with both of those comments. We're getting the same feedback from Santa Francis House on the number of elderly homeless that are entering the homeless market, unfortunately. It can, as Ryan says, open up elderly housing, new elderly housing can open up homes, for example, for families. But I also agree with Chris on, especially if you happen to increase the efficiency points, you're going to drive people towards 2-bedroom elderly anyway. So I tend to like it the way it is as well. The market needs to drive itself. The points are sort of leveled out right now. And it depends on where you're building, what the market, forcing a family market in an elderly area because of points doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I really think, thank you, Darren. I really think that that's the point, is that I don't think that, again, it's the board's goal is family. One of their goals and their priorities is family housing. We definitely don't want to make it so that senior developments cannot get funded, because obviously, as you mentioned, family housing isn't needed in every community. Every community has different needs. And by community, I mean different neighborhoods in Omaha or different neighborhoods in Lincoln. So definitely that's not our intent, to make it impossible for something to move forward, or extremely difficult for something to move forward that isn't incentivized by the court or isn't a priority of the court. We really do want to try to keep it balanced as much as possible while still also pushing towards the court's goals. Does anyone else have any comments on that? We appreciate the feedback.
I guess mine is more of a question. How would, say, a multi-building development where one building is restricted to seniors, how would that fare in terms of the points in that situation where some of the buildings are for family and another is strictly reserved for seniors?
I think that we'd have to follow up with you on that, but I think the way that it works right now is that that's really not possible, that the full project has to either be limited, or either you have to limit it to senior, to get the senior points, you cannot have 3 or 4 bedroom units. You can't have those larger units to get the senior points. And there's a whole long backstory to how that came to be, but we'd have to look into that to see if you had one building, if you had the same project and one building was senior and one building wasn't. I don't know if then that would meet the 55 and over and the 62 and over requirements for being a senior development. I don't know enough of that off the top of my head, so I'll look into that. Kelly, who are you with?
City of Omaha.
Oh, Kelly, yes, thank you. Sorry, didn't connect for me there.
Yeah, this is Chris, you can't have designated buildings, but there's nothing that says that you cannot have a family project and have all seniors in there. But
Yeah.
you can't go the other way around.
Yep, Chris, that's what I'm thinking too, but I didn't want to, I didn't want to commit when I wasn't 100% sure. It's not something we typically see. So we'll look into that for you, Kelly, for sure.
Great, thanks.
Anything else? Okay. Again, a couple QAPs ago, development of housing in Greater Nebraska was added. This is not, I'm not going to lie. If you talk to us in any venue, we'll say that this is not our favorite question. if it stays in the QAP, we're definitely going to tweak it a lot. Because right now it's a little, it's challenging. Again, you get points if you are, if a developer has, you can qualify for points if a developer has developed in non-metro areas. And what we found is that automatically kind of puts nonprofits, specifically nonprofits, and there's others as well, but it puts nonprofits who are only working in one community, it puts them as at a disadvantage. So we are planning on, like I said, really tweaking this, but what the board really wants us to focus on is alternative ways to encourage developers to look at greater Nebraska. So we understand a lot of this is market driven, and obviously you're not going to just go into a community that doesn't need that doesn't need housing and work, or the numbers don't work in a small community. You know, you might not be able to make a deal work. You might not be able to get a syndicator to buy the credits because it's too high risk. You might not be able to get loans. We understand that. But again, the board really wants to find ways to encourage developers to look outside of the metro areas. And we've had some comments like increasing the amount of developer fee allowed because of the risk of developing in smaller communities. Did anyone have any additional feedback or suggestions regarding kind of trying to incentivize incentivize developers to work outside of the metro areas?
Sarah, this is Darren again.
Hey, Darren.
Yeah, so I've said this before, but what's the rationale for awarding these points to metro applications?
I think the overall rationale is that if you're developing in outstate Nebraska, it's like a you know, it's points you receive. It's because you're developing throughout the entire state that then you are getting you know, you can get those points. So I think if we just did it in rural areas, I don't know that you're gonna attract anyone to rural areas, but again, you know, that's the rationale behind it. Pam and I did not,
So it's to incent development in greater Nebraska in rural
Yeah.
areas. I get
you
that.
got it.
So you evidently don't necessarily want to incent development in urban Nebraska because of these points.
Well, because
That's the way we look at it. And the reality is for us, and I'm just speaking for us.
Yep.
There's zero incentive for us to develop in rural Nebraska because we cannot get these 2 points. Somebody calls me from small town Nebraska, and before we want to spend $50,000, $75,000 on a development, I'm like, if it's a good development, I'm like, call Kathy, call Rob, because they'll get the points. That's just straight up. That's the way we look at it.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Darren, is there anything that would incentivize you towards that? Or is that just not your market, so you're not interested in doing that?
Oh, no, we'd love to do rural Nebraska. We've done a lot in rural Iowa in Woodbine. But it's where and what's it look like. We'll do any development. I mean, you've seen some of the things that we've done, and even from a nonprofit standpoint in urban. So a nonprofit wants us to do something in Omaha. Well, we have to look at those 2 points as 2 points we're not going to get.
Yep. Thank you, Darren. We appreciate the feedback. Anybody else? What? Twyla, did you have a comment?
As a rural, Fairbury is definitely a part of the rural community there. I would hate for us to lose those 2 points because our projects are smaller and so they're less attractive. Our projects, are more complicated because we're smaller and we're more rural, but you know, the need is there. And there does need to be an incentive for us to look worthwhile to the developers, because there's so many resources that, you know, we're struggling to pull together to even try and look attractive to the developers. And so I would advocate that those 2 points are needed for smaller communities.
Sure, and we do have small community points, and I don't foresee those being removed. So that is just one of the many categories of points. Because we do realize that those communities under 5,000 or under 15,000, it may be harder to compete. So yes, we appreciate that. Thank you, Twyla. Very helpful. Anybody else? Okay, at this time, I'd like to just open the floor up for general comments. If you have anything, this is the time. We are starting right after our last focus group will be when we're really digging into making changes to the QAP. We'd like to hear your suggestions now, because we have obviously we'd like to do it when we write it, but then before when it's in the final public comment period. So if you have any general suggestions, comments, concerns, we'd love to hear them. If you don't feel comfortable saying them in an informal focus group, you can always email them to us. That's not a problem. Our emails are on the website. So you can always send it to our tax credit email, or most of you, I think probably got a registration link from our tax credit email, or if you have my email directly, you can send them to me and I'll forward them to everyone. But we want to give you an opportunity to make the floor yours and give us any ideas, comments, concerns. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and make comments as you like. Hi, Bill.
Well, hi, this is Bill from Brinshore Development. I just want to say thanks for this opportunity, and I'm sure we'll submit some written comments once we put our thoughts together as a team. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else?
This Chris. I promised Ashley I wasn't going to talk, but no one else.
Chris, no, we want you to talk.
A couple things. One, I know this was somewhat brought up earlier on the leverage and collaboration. A couple things, and I brought this up for the previous QAP for this one, and we did lower the percentages. But for example, for the points, even on a small project, now $7 million project, to get a half a point, you've got to have 175,000 in additional dollar amounts, which qualifies as firm commitments from local governments, private partners, nonprofits. The issue that has been around for a long time, that may help on some of this stuff and may help us bring some of this in, is TIF. I ran into one year where I got points for being able to use TIF, being in a TIF zone with a letter from the city saying the project qualifies for TIF. And then this next year I lost that point because I did not have the actual TIF contract and everything else in place by the time the application went in. I would like to see TIF brought back into that discussion without having the final TIF contract in, just because so much work has to be done after award. We're going through that now on a couple projects to where, you know, the city gave us a letter of support and a letter stating that, you know, the project qualifies for TIF. You know, we anticipate the amount to be this, but at that point, I mean, usually we're not going to get a firm commitment on TIF until after the project's awarded. We have all of our final plans, all of our final costs. Then it goes to city council, then it gets approved. So maybe a little bit of flexibility on, the firm commitment from a local government, clarifying what that is. Is it a letter from the mayor and city council that states that the project is in the TIF district and it qualifies for this amount, and the final contract won't be signed till after the award, because you'll never get TIF points for this the way it's worded right now. And again, depending on the size of the project, if you're looking at 20%, that's several $100,000 to try and get even 4 points. And that's hard, especially depending on what projects you're in. TIF is always going to be the biggest opportunity to get those points. So I don't know how. I'd be curious to know how many leverage points you've been able to give out since this has been put in. I can't imagine it's very many.
It depends. There's actually been some projects that very much do, and it depends on the community and the TIF process, because we have gotten some that have TIF commitments, firm commitments. Our problem with why we want the firm commitments, and I'm totally open to suggestions on how we. Thomas, could you mute for? Part of our challenge on this is because when we look at the scoring, if it comes to the end and you got leverage and collaboration points, and when we do the QA, when we do the coster and you don't have leverage and you lost points, how are those points going to be made up? And that's one of the things that we really try to be careful about. Is we don't want to give points that aren't a really almost sure thing that you're gonna have, just because of that issue, that at the end, if something happened and you didn't get the points. Now that could happen with anything, and we realize that, but some things are harder to fix, like
Sure.
leverage and collaboration is a lot harder to make up those points than, like, let's say a supportive service provider is no longer in the area. Well, you can just switch supportive service providers, or pick a different supportive service, and that's easy to make up those points so that you're still scoring and you still would have received the same amount of points. So that's really what we look at, just because it is so competitive. You guys are doing an amazing job. All of our applicants are doing an amazing job putting in great applications, and sometimes there's ties. So those points, I know they're very black and white, but they're black and white in regards to that committed versus just a interest letter because of that. We don't want to ever be in a case where a project gets to the end and we don't know how you're going to make up those points.
Right.
So
Well, and even if we can maybe clarify what a firm commitment from a local government is, would be helpful. Because
Perfect.
there's times where the city will say, tell us what you need and we'll write it. And it's still not do you need a signed contract? Do you need the signed development agreement? I mean, if you can clarify that, then I think maybe you'll see a little bit more activity in that area.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any input or comments on that?
This is Darren again. From a TIF standpoint, yeah, it doesn't make sense to go through the formal process until after you get an allocation. But in lieu of a letter from the city, if it cash flows, was it Exhibit 109, construction or perm? Would either of those exhibits from the proposed lender, as long as it cash flows, suffice?
For the collaboration?
For a TIF loan,
Yeah.
where you can't necessarily get a firm letter of commitment from the city until you've gone through the process. But if it cash flows, and TIF has proposed and a lender is willing to issue that letter of commitment, is that sufficient?
Let us talk about that. Thank you. We can definitely ponder that. Any other suggestions? Ryan, did I see you unmute?
Chris had one more.
No, I did. Just back to what Darren said. So that really, at that point, that's really no different than a federal home loan bank. I mean, I would agree with Darren. I think, you know, if my bank will write me a letter based on what we think the TIF is going to be, that shouldn't be any different than having some sort of a commitment from the Federal Home Loan Bank or another financial institution. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Ryan, did I see you were unmuted as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've talked to the city of Omaha numerous times kind of about this TIF, you know, dilemma. And they're not going to budge on, you know, committing anything until after award. They're like, you know, you have to have an award to go through TIF, because TIF is a process in the city of Omaha. I mean, you'd be talking about 6 months of time. And they want to know that the credits are in place. So, I mean, Omaha's pretty much out for TIF, you know, any kind of hard commitments.
Thank you, Ryan. We have about, oh, Bill?
Well, I don't want to speak for the city, so don't take it this way, but I don't think the city will even give you a commitment letter prior to the city council approving the TIF agreement and the TIF note. Just in my experience, that's not something that they feel comfortable doing if it requires council action.
Yeah, we've spoken to Bridget a little bit about the process. So I believe you're right as far as I understand as well, Bill. So it is something that we're aware of, and you know, definitely that's why we welcome the comments on this. We know it's a challenge in some communities, or a majority of communities maybe. So anyone else on that particular topic? Okay, does anyone else have any general comments that they'd like to make? Okay.
I'm sorry, one more, I promise this is it. The hill that I will die on this QAP is going to be the high opportunity points for the rural areas. I know I brought this up last time. You know, when you're thinking of connectivity and education, employment, housing, and health, if these points are brought into the rural areas, we're going to have basically point chasing to those communities that have these points available. And I know that's how we work as developers, is to go to those communities. Right now, there's high-speed internet is being brought into some of our rural communities as we speak. I mean, there's things that are happening, but I still think some of the credit needs to be resting on the developer, the market study, the community itself, and the need for a project like this, as opposed to the matrix that we're going to come up with that's going to say, yes, you can go to, you know, it makes sense to go to Lexington, but it doesn't make sense to go to Fairbury because Fairbury doesn't have a new hospital. I mean, so I think we need to be careful on bringing this in, and I know why it's coming in and I know where it's coming from, but we're not making the same comparison between communities in Omaha versus rural communities throughout the state of Nebraska. So I'm not comfortable with where this is going to end up, but it'll be what it'll be.
Well, Chris, Chris, you haven't seen the metrics yet, so hopefully when you see that, and that should be introduced sometime before the QAP is published. So you'll be able to see that, mull it over, get some comments on that. But it's, the things we are looking at are definitely, you know, remember, metro and non-metro are still going to be scored completely separately, just like they are now. And I mean, the board, as you mentioned, this is being driven. This is one of the board's priorities, is to make sure that we are incentivizing areas of high opportunity. And we are very aware of rural areas or non-metro areas and trying to really focus on, we're not saying that if you have to have a hospital to get points. We're trying to be very reasonable and coming up with metrics that are going to incentivize those communities that do have things going on, but it isn't going to make it so that you have to be a major hub, right? We're really trying to be very balanced in our approach. So I hope that again, when we introduce this and we share this with you in late June, you know, we'll be able to have some conversations around it that are a little bit more meaty, because you'll actually have the information in front of you. I know it's tough now because you don't know.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you for the comment.
Sarah,
Anything-
Darren
yeah.
again. The areas of high opportunity, at least from a metro perspective, are it's not totally ideal. It doesn't completely offset the points for QCT and choice neighborhoods, for example, but it's better than nothing. So thank you for that, I guess. But to Chris's point, I kind of get the impression, like I said, I haven't seen the metrics either, but if you're trying to sort of follow Iowa's model for some appendices that they have that drive points to or job creation, rent burden, density, those kinds of things, it will put pinpoints on a map that developers are going to go to. So my only comment is just be very wary of that. And whatever communities those points go to, just make sure that the cities completely support any proposed development.
Well, you know, we can't, I mean, the cities can't, I mean, we can't get approval letters from the city. It's not, we're not allowed to do that anymore. So, you know, I don't know. We have not looked at Iowa's new information. We have not looked at them. So I can't speak for what's in theirs. We've looked at some other states that are a little bit, more similar to us in size. So, and the way that we're kind of have our metro, non-metro split. So I appreciate that, Darren, because we can look at Iowa and see what pitfalls they've had. We'll look into that and use that as a model to maybe not do.
Right. Thank you.
Like, anything else on that topic or anything else? Any other topics you'd like to discuss? We have about 5 minutes left.
I just wanted to say, you know, I think you guys have done a good job of kind of cleaning up some of the exhibits and combining some things. And so maybe we don't have as many pieces of paper to track down and get signatures and check dates and all that other stuff. So I do appreciate that. If there's other things that we can consider too, like forms that are created so you get the information that you want, you know, I'd continue to challenge you to look at those things in the future, because I feel like that is beneficial for everyone.
100%, right? And that's definitely something that we're looking at. Every QAP we're obviously going to look at ways to streamline things, make it flow a little, make the application flow a little bit better, try to make it so that there's less duplication of data entry, so that you know, a lot of times in the past you change something in one area of the app and then you just, you know, you wouldn't in the other. So we are constantly looking at ways to do that, because it not only makes it difficult for you guys, it makes it difficult for us to review the application, because our whole goal is to be consistent and transparent. So that's why, you know, you can now request applications And we want the margin of error for all of us to be less. So definitely it's something we're working on, and we do have some ideas for some additional forms for this time around, and some clarification on exhibits. That's definitely a lot of what we talk about when we score with the Department of Economic Development, and what we'll do actually immediately following this meeting. We'll work with the Economic Development team to work on some of those items. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Okay, again, I encourage you, if you have comments, again, you didn't feel comfortable sharing, this is a casual environment. It's not an official public comment period, so we invite you to share them with us. You feel free to email us. And this focus group, I think we just got some of the other focus groups up online. I don't know if she's got them. Okay, I don't know that they're online yet, but they will all be available at on our main forms and documents page under the 26-27 QAP. There's links. Our marketing person is working on getting those updated. So if they're not there yet, they should be there today, at least the first two, and then this one we will get uploaded shortly as well. So that way, if you want some noise in the background, you can listen to events you weren't able to attend. So,
and remember, there is one more on Tuesday, June 4th at 2 o'clock.
thank you, everyone.